This is my grandma and her father, my great grandfather, organized an event for Martin Luther King Jr. to come and speak for the community. And I'm gonna ask her some questions and she's gonna answer them. Can you talk a little bit about the civil rights movement and what was going on at the time?
Okay, Martin Luther King came to speak in Grosse Pointe in March of 1968. At that time, the President of the United States was Lyndon Johnson, and he was a supporter and promoter, as well as the Democratic Party was, of a change to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And they wanted to include fair housing in the Civil Rights Act and make sure that fair housing was available to all, including all minorities, including Black people. There was a lot of disagreement with that. There were a lot of people who didn't want civil rights for all.
Why was it unusual for Martin Luther King to come and speak for Grosse Pointe?
Well, Kennedy, this event happened in 1968, over 40 years ago. And at that time, there were still unequal practices with housing and other important equal rights issues not available to Blacks. And there was a group called the Grosse Pointe Human Relations Council in Grosse Pointe who believed in fair housing available to all people who could afford it. And they wanted to bring Martin Luther King in to speak to the community. And the problem being that there were several residents of Grosse Pointe who did not agree with that. And so the idea that he would come to speak wasn't popular with everyone in the Grosse Pointe area. Your great-grandpa, my dad, was president of the school board at the time. So that's why he was so involved, because this group wanted to have Martin Luther King speak in their new huge auditorium at the high school, and the school board had to approve that.
Why did your father want Martin Luther King Jr. to come speak to the community?
Because my father, well, first of all, his background, he was raised in New York City. He lived he lived in an area where everyone was diverse from all different countries all over the world. And he went to a public school in New York where his friends were rich and poor and Black and white and all kinds, Italian and Polish, and so he could never understand in a community like Grosse Pointe why people were so prejudiced and why everyone had to just want to live with others that were the same.
Okay. What are some of the challenges you faced while this was going on?
Well, for me personally, I was temporarily living with your grandma, your great-grandma and grandpa at the time. And there were they were away in Florida prior to the speech, and they wanted me to stay there and answer the phone and everything. And there were a lot of hate calls that I received. They were very scary. I had to call the police. Grandpa had a lot of threats. He was called names because he was so involved in bringing Martin Luther King to the community.
What was the hardest part of all of this?
The hardest part really was later because Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated 3 weeks after he spoke to the Grosse Pointe community. And to me, and to lots of people who supported his appearance there, it was such a tragedy because he didn't have an opportunity to live out his dream of racial justice.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you for letting me interview you.
Oh, you're welcome, Kennedy. It's a real pleasure. And I hope your class enjoys your interview.
Okay. Bye.